Welcome back, everybody. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Sylvester Inspires Beliefcast. I want to welcome my guest today, Hayley Evans. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, you bet. I am so excited for our listeners to hear your story. Your story is unbelievable. And when I say that, it truly is the transformation that you've been through. So, listeners, you are in for a treat today. I do need to thank our sponsor, Veracity Networks, and my friend Drew Peterson for making that possible. They have helped me get this word out and this podcast out, and it's been a blessing to this whole process. So thank you, Veracity Networks. And again, listeners, thank you for your support. And I promise you today, this one is going to touch your hearts, and you're going to want to share this with those that you know that may be struggling. So again, Hayley, thank you for taking the time to do this today.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. So we were just talking. We met about 3 years ago. And we met at Wasatch Recovery. You were actually one of my clients.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's where I got to know her. And at that time, she was struggling with addiction. And so we're going to get into her story. And so why don't we just start, kind of like let the listeners know like where you grew up and a little bit about your family.
Yeah. So I grew up in Salt Lake in the Avenues. Both of my parents were extremely involved in my life. I have one older sister.
Okay.
My dad was a court commissioner, so it's kind of like a family court judge.
Okay.
So he was working quite a bit. My mom was a dental hygienist, and they provided for me the best they could.
Right.
They always put my sister and I first. However, they had their own problems, and so they got divorced when I was about 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. How was that when you were, can you think back about what was going through your mind at this time? And
I just remember seeing my so my sister's 9 years older than I am. So she was a teenager.
right.
And I remember her bawling and just being extremely upset. And I was so confused, but I didn't really understand the dynamic.
Yeah.
All I could think was, oh, I get 2 Christmases now. Because I was like, oh, more presents. So, but my sister was really torn up about it. And I just remember being concerned about my sister.
Okay. Were you close to your sister growing up?
Yeah, she was a huge part of my life.
Okay.
And so eventually after my parents got divorced, I had shared custody. So I was with my dad Monday and Tuesday, my mom Wednesday and Thursday, and they switch off weekends.
Gotcha.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
How was that? Did you enjoy that part, or did you start understanding what was going on at that point?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
And it was really inconsistent. There was a
Right.
lot of inconsistencies. And so that was kind of rough for me. That being said, though, my parents really did try their best to put me in front of everything. They made me feel loved and important and all of this stuff.
Yeah. Right.
But
So, obviously going through a divorce as a kid, it's tough. And then just growing up in general can be a hard thing, and sometimes we pick up these belief systems that we have about ourselves that kind of hold us back. If you think back, growing up, were there some belief systems that you struggled with about yourself that kind of held you back?
yeah, well, so at a pretty young age, I was molested by an older cousin.
Okay.
And so it was from like ages 5 to 9. And I didn't really understand what was going on, but I always felt like I was doing something wrong. Or I always felt like I wasn't fully connected with my family. Like I always felt not enough, I guess. Even though they did nothing to make me feel that way, that's just how I felt.
Sure.
So I had pretty low self-esteem at a really young age.
So this started at age 5, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Did you tell anyone at the time, or did you just kind of feel like you didn't even know how to share it, or did you just keep it to yourself?
So I didn't even understand that it was anything that shouldn't be happening.
Right, okay.
So my sister, it would happen at my grandma's house. We'd go to my grandma's house in Utah County every Sunday, and he would do it there. And my sister walked in one time and told my mom, and then it all came to light.
Okay.
So, and my parents put me in therapy at a very young age as well after
Sure.
it, because they didn't know what to do, but I didn't understand that either at that time.
Wow. And so was that age 9 when your sister found this out that was going on?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in 4th grade.
And that's what stopped it ultimately.
Right.
So thankfully your sister actually did, walk in, so it didn't continue even.
Oh, completely.
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 So at that time, did you know something was wrong about it? I mean, when your sister found out, and you saw maybe her reaction, or?
Yeah, I almost felt punished in a way.
Really?
Because, and it's not anything that any adult was doing wrong, but it's just the circumstances that happened afterwards. I had to go to therapy twice a week, and I really didn't like it.
Yeah, right.
And I couldn't play with my friends. I couldn't do my normal activities because I had to go to therapy. My extended family was split up after that because I couldn't be around that cousin anymore. And so my aunts and uncles, I felt like I was the reason that my family was splitting up.
Yeah, and I hear this a lot. It's very common because, again, you're a young child. You don't, like you said, you didn't even fully understand what was really even going on. And then you see all of these things happening. Got to go to therapy, family splitting up, can't go play with these friends, can't go to this family party. You almost think it's my fault. What did I do?
Exactly.
Yeah. And this happens a lot with kids who, when their parents divorce at a young age, the child even subconsciously thinks it's my fault. Like, even though it's not, but, they think that. And so here you are thinking, this is maybe on some level my fault that all these things are happening. Is that fair to say? Or
that's exactly how I felt. Yeah. Wow. And then my sister went to a fashion school in New York when I was about 13 or 14. So the only person that kind of understood what I was going through was at school in New York. And so junior high was extremely rough for me.
Wow. So you probably felt alone
and yeah, extremely. And I was dealing with all of this new transition with having 2 houses, seeing my mom go through an extreme depression because she was still in love with my dad. And I would come home to her crying all the time. And it was a hard time.
Wow. So you were dealing with a lot of heavy stuff as a young child.
Yeah.
So many different aspects. Wow. You said you felt like you had this low self-esteem. Any other beliefs around that, though, that just kind of you felt held you back in life or at that time? Or
really, I just felt disconnected from people. I had 2 or 3 really close friends to me, but I just felt different from everybody. I would always compare myself to other people in my class I felt really, really down about myself, to the point where I would cry myself to sleep a lot when I was young.
Wow.
Yeah.
So did you have any close friends at that time?
I did, yeah. And I was involved in almost every sport. My dad made sure that I played almost every sport. So, it was basketball, soccer, tennis, everything.
Yeah.
So that kept my spirits up, and my confidence was building from that.
And were your friends from those different sports that you played with?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they lived in my neighborhood too,
Gotcha.
So it was perfect.
Yeah. So again, and I started this off by talking about how you've overcome an addiction, and obviously that started when you were younger. And let's talk about when that kind of when you introduced yourself, or it was introduced to you, drugs and partying and that kind of thing. Let's talk about that.
Okay. So junior high was really rough. I was bullied a lot, but I feel like all of us have either been bullied or were the bully. So that's kind of part of growing up.
Yeah. Junior high is like a minefield.
Yeah.
It's like, well, let's just try to get through this without blowing up. Right.
Right. Exactly. So that was a little rough. But I made it through. I made it to high school. And,
do you know why were you being bullied, do you think?
I just was really quiet, and I kind of kept to myself, and a lot of the louder kids in my class would always just tease me or just make fun of me, to the point where my face would go bright red. They called me tomato because I'd get so embarrassed so easily. Okay. So, yeah. Yeah.
And we can laugh at it now, but at the time when you're a kid, that's tough when you're being teased in front of everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a tough time.
Yeah.
Okay, so that went throughout junior high, and then you get into high school, and
Yeah, and freshman year went fine. And then it was the summer of freshman year. My friend said she was going to a rave, and I went to protect her was my intention.
Okay.
And I snuck out of my house and we went there, and then I was all of my friends were taking ecstasy. So the first drug I actually took was ecstasy at 15.
Really? At 15, okay. And that's freshman year, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that kind of started everything. So I went to the first rave, took ecstasy. I blacked out. I don't remember anything from
Really?
that night. Yeah. And I woke up and I had a new boyfriend. Apparently he was a senior and I was a freshman. And so that kind of started my relationship downfall.
Well, so say that again. You woke up the next day with a boyfriend.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, okay. So
talk about that. Just throw that out there.
So I blacked out, but I remember little pieces. I mean, I'm sure we can all relate. When you
Right.
black out, you kind of remember little flashes
Right.
of what happened.
Right.
And so yeah, I remember I met him, and then we were texting, and so then he eventually became my boyfriend. I
Oh,
should
gotcha.
say.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Just want to clarify that.
Yeah. So after that, I continued to rave about once to 2 times every 2 months. My grades were pretty well. They were really well all the way
Still
through.
playing sports at this time as well?
Yeah, I was actually on the rowing team.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is really weird for Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was on the rowing team at this time, and I was still partying, and then I found alcohol, which was a whole other ball game. So I started going drunk to school because school was really hard for me. I would get really bad anxiety to the point where I wouldn't want to go. So me and my best friend would get drunk, go to school, and just act like everything was fine.
Yeah. And in your mind at that time, were you thinking this, ecstasy and then eventually alcohol at that point, you felt like, okay, I can actually handle school if I drink a little bit before I go? Is that kind of the mindset?
Yeah, exactly. And I felt cool. Like I felt like, okay, I finally fit in because all of these people that I thought were super cool are doing it too. So
Did you find yourself when you first took ecstasy, did you, yes, you blacked out that first time and you wake up the next day or whatever. Did you find yourself thinking like, wow, I really enjoyed that. That was fun. I can't wait to do it again kind of thing? Or was it like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that again? Just what was your mindset at that time, if you can remember?
I would crave it. I would listen to certain music, and before each rave, even 3 weeks before a rave, and I would feel this like pump in my chest, and I would just get super excited to the point where I would obsess over it and start craving it.
Really?
So yeah.
Well, I think that happens a lot, especially with someone as rough of a upbringing as you had.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, you find this experience like it's something that brought a good feeling to you at that time.
Right.
And it's like, man, you've been feeling so down, and then you have this experience. I get why you would, and I think that's a lot of times where that all or nothing kind of stuff comes in. And I remember in my own story, when I first, got high for the first time, I was just like, whoa, I've never felt like this before. I want this again kind of thing. So I was just wondering if that was the same mindset.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And ever since the molestation, I kind of had a hard time being intimate or even wanting to hug people. I had a really hard time hugging people. And so ecstasy and alcohol, I kind of felt like a normal person where I was like, okay, I want people in my personal bubble, when before it would be like, I would hate it if anybody came even close to me.
Right.
So yeah, it was kind of, I finally felt normal.
Yeah. Did your family notice that, like your mom and dad, that you were struggling with, the hugging people? I mean, did you struggle hugging them as well? Could they tell that you were struggling?
Yeah. So actually, after junior high, I kind of put the molestation in the back of my head. It was a subconscious thing.
Right.
And so my parents noticed. I wouldn't hug any family members after that. Or if I had to, I would get extremely anxious before, like, oh my gosh, I have to hug them. I have to hug them,
Really?
which is super bizarre.
Yeah.
But for a child or for a young teenager, it was scary, and I didn't know how to feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really weird.
Wow. Well, again, understanding, knowing what you've been through, that makes sense that you would struggle with that type of thing. And so when you go to a rave and you're taking ecstasy, it's all about hugging and loving, right? It's like the complete opposite, isn't it?
Exactly. That's why I was like, oh my gosh, I'm normal.
Yeah, it's like, wow, I can connect with people. I can hug. I can tell people I love them. I can,
right.
I feel free.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. So then it led to you started drinking.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, drinking. And then I continued to do all of the party drugs, which are acid, mushrooms. And as soon as I found a new drug, it was my new favorite. And I would go to the extreme. So the first time I tried mushrooms, I would just keep doing it like every weekend.
Yeah.
Then I tried acid, and then I do that every weekend. Then I started mixing drugs, ecstasy and acid. And then, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The downward spiral.
Right.
Did you at the time, now, when you were doing the acid and the mushrooms and all that stuff, was that still freshman and sophomore year? How old are you at this time?
I'm about 17.
17. So junior year maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So junior year, you're partying pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
Does your family, or particularly your mom and dad, do they know you're partying like this? Do they have any idea?
Yeah. So my grades went down really, really low.
At first they were great,
Mm-hmm.
doing really well, and then they started to drop. Okay.
Right. And my dad, he's extremely strict.
Mm-hmm.
And I started skipping class, and he would get phone calls from the school like, Hayley hasn't been in class today, and he would just be livid with me.
Right.
So my dad and I had a lot of tension throughout high school because I just was not listening to him. I didn't care what he had to say, and he didn't know what to do with me.
Right.
So, and then I continued to sneak out and lie to them all the time. And I quit rowing. I dedicated my whole life to partying, basically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's so unfortunate that it happens to so many kids that, there's an issue when you stop doing the things that actually brought you joy.
Right.
The rowing, the sports, the hanging out with your friends, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to connect with your family the best that you could, but then you start, and then the lying creeps in.
Mm-hmm.
Then you start lying,
Yeah. Yeah, it was bad, and I had a lot of guilt and shame, and it just drove me into more using and getting more drunk, and I was smoking weed every day at this point too. And then at age 17 was the first time I got in trouble with the law. And yeah, I was in Lava Hot Springs. We went to trip acid out there, and we got pulled over.
Okay.
Yeah. And my dad being a judge,
Oh, wow.
the police officer called him and was like, we have your daughter in Pocatello, Idaho. And he was like, what? Why is she in Pocatello right now?
Yeah, what?
Yeah. And so, at that point, I had to be on probation. They ordered my dad to be my probation officer because it was out of state, which is a really rare case.
Yeah, really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So,
were you afraid of your dad?
yes, I was extremely.
Okay. Yeah, and this is not bagging on your dad whatsoever. We're not, I just was curious, if you feared your dad, and looking back on that, do you wish maybe he handled it differently, or do you feel like he handled it the way he probably should have based on what you were struggling with?
It's kind of hard to say because I can't imagine having a daughter treat me the way that I treated him.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
He did have a really rough job, and he would take it home with him a lot, and his temper was really bad sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But he's only human, so
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
He was doing the best that he could.
Right, and we've never dealt with addiction in my family. I'm the first addict out of my extended family and our family, so he had no idea what to do.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yeah, and then you're skipping class, your grades are dropping, and then he gets a call. You're in Pocatello, getting arrested.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's this like, yeah, and I think in any parent would be like, what's going on? What do we do?
Right.
But I think a lot of times too, parents don't. You're like you said, parents don't know how to handle that in the moment. Like, what's the best way to handle this kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of a tough situation for them
Exactly.
at that time.
Yeah, and so I started being drug tested. So I was on probation through my dad, but they also wanted drug tests
Right.
through the state. And so I started being drug tested at that point. And
did you work your way around the drug test?
usually, yeah.
Yeah.
I stopped smoking weed. And mostly I worked my way around it.
Because you probably knew that the drug test doesn't catch everything, right? Most kids know this.
Yeah.
It's just the truth.
Yeah. And
so you probably like, okay, well, I'll do these drugs because I won't get caught for those.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. And I mean, that's the way that addicts work is we know how to manipulate every situation. Yeah. And so I was just, I knew there was a way I could get around it. And so I did. And it made me slow down for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest, it did. And I was able to graduate high school barely.
Okay.
Which I missed a lot of school, and so I had packets, and he locked me in my bedroom for about 3 months, and like, you are not leaving until you finish these packets. I will not have a daughter that does not graduate. I was like, okay.
Yeah. Wow. So you end up graduating,
mm-hmm.
and are you still are you on probation still when you graduate? Are you still being drug tested and all that?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I eventually get off probation. And I'm still partying quite a bit. I go into Salt Lake Community College, and I would go to that school drunk as well. And it was just a downward spiral from there. It was, yeah.
Were you feeling? I mean, tell us how you were feeling. Like, were you feeling depressed? What was going through your mind at this time? You're partying hard, things are going down, but how are you feeling at this time?
So actually, let me backpedal a little bit.
Yeah.
So when I was about 17, it was around the same time that I got in trouble with the law. So through the drug testing place through the state, they had me go to therapy as well. And the things from the molestation started coming back. I started having flashbacks and PTSD from the molestation. And that was a lot to handle because I knew what had happened now. I kind of fully understood the whole process of it. And so I became really resentful towards my family and in a really negative way. And then the same therapist diagnosed me with body dysmorphia at that time as well. So... which is when you look in the mirror, you see something completely different than what is actually there.
Yeah. Did that lead to having like what do they call it? I'm drawing a blank here.
Mm-hmm.
When you have like an eating disorder, that's what I'm trying to say.
It wasn't so much of an eating disorder.
Okay.
It was more I hated how I looked.
Okay.
And
so it wasn't like I'm fat, I need to lose weight.
No.
It was more like I don't like certain parts of me.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I would compare myself to my sister a lot because her and I look very similar, but I've always thought that she's just way more beautiful than I am. And so it was to the point where it was eating me up inside. Like I wouldn't look in the mirror, or when I would cry. And I would look at my best friend and just like, it was really bizarre. I just felt, I felt ugly. I felt not good enough. I felt just, it was a hard time.
Wow. And how old were you again when this started?
17.
17.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So then obviously, and I talk a lot about this with my clients, and I've shared it a lot here on this podcast, that our beliefs dictate our behavior, right? So if we believe something like if I believe I'm stupid, I'm going to behave a certain way based off of that belief.
Right.
So when you believe all these things about you, everything you've been through, you're starting to have flashbacks of what happened when you were younger, when you were molested. I mean, those irrational negative beliefs were dictating how you were behaving.
Right.
Even though you're going to get in trouble by your dad, that you're going to get caught, but you're willing to risk all of that. You're going to still party and get high and get wasted.
Yeah, I didn't care.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really didn't care about my well-being at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And then with my parents not knowing what to do with me, they just continued to punish me, and it was just more like, okay, I'm really not worth it, you know?
Yeah.
And so it was a hard time.
Did you ever feel, down enough to where did you ever feel suicidal? Anything like that going through this?
I did. So when I was high, obviously, I felt on top of the world. I loved life. And then as soon as I would come down or as soon as I was hungover, I would just lay in bed all day and just not feel worthy.
Yeah.
And then after high school, I started getting into cocaine a lot. And that's when I got really suicidal, extremely suicidal.
Yeah, because the highs of that are so high, but then when you come off that cliff, they call it, you're so low.
It was extremely bad.
Did your sister know this was all going on? Because I know you said she had moved out, and obviously she's 9 years older than you. Did she know that and what was her role in any of this? Was she trying to support you through this, or did she know what was going on?
At this time, she would get frustrated with me because I would miss miss Easter sometimes because I was too hungover, and she would try to get me out of bed and we'd get in a fight. But she kind of she partied a lot in high school too, mostly just drinking as far as I know.
Yeah.
But she kind of understood like, oh, it's just a party phase. Like she's going to grow out of it. It's just, she didn't really understand the extent of it.
Okay. Mm-hmm. But she did know something was up for sure. Okay, great. I just didn't know if that, what she was thinking at the time. And, but, so you start doing cocaine. Let's just kind of go from there and just share what this all led up to. And we'll get into
into the nitty gritty.
Yes.
So, when I was about 19, I was introduced to a relationship that I was going to be in for the next 8 years, which I didn't know at the time.
Right.
He was from the other side of the tracks, if you want to put it that way. I'd never really met or been attracted to anybody like him. Mm-hmm. He was a drug dealer. He was stealing ecstasy and weed. And so that was, at that point in my life, I thought that was extremely attractive. It sounds like somebody that I would want to be with. Yeah,
now you look at this and go, what was I thinking?
Like,
but
poor
again,
innocent 19-year-old. Well,
you're like, wow, this guy's amazing. Look what he's doing. Wow.
Yeah, so as soon as I met him, we were kind of fire and ice for each other. Mm-hmm. He was raised in a completely different upbringing than I was, and he introduced me to a lifestyle that I'd never been introduced to before, but it was exciting to me. It was exhilarating to me. Yeah. So I started doing more ecstasy probably about 3 times a week because he always had it. Yeah. And the come downs were extremely bad. And so he introduced me to Lortab. And he was like, this will take your headache away. This will make you go to sleep. And this will just help you. And so I started doing Lortab. And I continued to do Lortab. As soon as I found Lortab, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. Like, it takes my edge away. I feel normal. I can actually function, and I'm just numb.
It's interesting because you said earlier, it was like you'd get kind of bored with one drug, and then the next new drug was the best thing ever. Mm-hmm. And then you get bored with that, or you build up that tolerance, and then it's like, I need something else. And here you are, it's led all the way up, and now you find Lortab, and in your mind, like, this is the best thing.
Right.
Where you had said that previous to every other drug. Mm-hmm. Isn't that fascinating?
It's insane.
So now you got Lortab.
Yeah.
You're thinking this is amazing.
Right. And at this time, so my dad and I, like I'd mentioned, we had a really hard time throughout high school. So as soon as I turned 18, I decided to move in with my mom because she was easy on me. She let me do what I want. Right. And so I moved in with my mom full time, and I continued to party full time. Yeah. So I was continuing. Then I got to do Lortab every day. And it got to the point where I was sniffing up to 8 to 10 pills a day, which is so much. Wow. And I did that for about 3 years. I had a job during this time. I was working. I got in trouble with the law again this time, so I was back on probation. And I told them I got a prescription. That's what it was. And so I brought in the prescription. So my drug tests were never dirty because I had a prescription for Percocets for my wisdom teeth. So,
okay.
Yeah, I was able to get around that.
Yeah.
At that time, that was okay, but that wouldn't fly today. But,
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. And the relationship with that boyfriend, he started emotionally abusing me, and I'd never been treated like that by anybody before, so I thought that I could fix him or I could help him, or there was something that I was doing wrong to make him act like that, when deep down I knew there wasn't.
Yeah.
And he became extremely controlling and jealous. He wouldn't let me hang out with my girlfriends anymore. So it was my girlfriends would text me, and he would take my phone and text them pretending to be me, saying, don't text me ever, or don't call or text me ever again. We're not friends. And
Really?
so it was to the point where it was just him and I. And he also supplied all the drugs as well. So I kind of was just toying with my emotions. Like, where do I go? I don't feel like myself anymore. I miss my family, my friends, but this is where I'm at.
Yeah.
And so eventually I moved out with this boyfriend.
Okay. Wow. And I mean, obviously he's trying to control you to the point where he's pretending to be you and telling your friends, stay away, I don't like you anymore. And, and you know, I can imagine your friends getting this text going, what is going on? You know, I mean, I know we're jumping ahead a little bit here, but did you get back with these friends, or did they know this wasn't really you, or?
Yeah,
okay.
I did. Yeah. Today they understood, and they even had an intervention with me.
Really?
At some point, and I was just so caught up in it that.
Were you still with this guy when they had the intervention?
Yeah.
And they were probably telling you, get away from this dude.
Yeah, they told me, he's ruining you. He's ruining your life. And I just was like, you guys don't understand.
Yeah.
I'm in love, but.
I'm in love. He's got all the drugs. Yeah. So if I remember right, it got to the point where, Lortabs led to other things as well.
Right.
So let's talk about that, and then how you got to the point where you were doing some things that you would never think of doing.
Okay.
That we talked about previous. Yeah.
So at this point, I wasn't talking to my family at all. They didn't know what to do with me, so I kind of cut them out of my lives because I was on a mission to do something else with my life, and they weren't agreeing with that. So I eventually moved to heroin. Would talk to my family maybe once every 3 months.
Yeah.
I moved from my house in Salt Lake to a trailer in West Valley with about 5 people, and my life just took a drastic downfall. And I started had a lot of criminal behavior. I started stealing things from stores, and I would return them, get the gift cards, sell them on KSL. We started robbing people on KSL, which was just completely out of my norm. It was completely out of anything that I'd ever done.
Right.
Up until this point, I had only had drug charges. I'd never done anything against anybody.
Right.
And then I started stealing from my family as well, which was just, I would never do that.
Yeah.
And so, that was a really hard time. We were on the bus and on tracks going from store to store stealing things, and it was just, it was complete chaos, really.
Yeah. At this point, I mean, does your family know how bad things have gotten for you? Did they realize, man, did they know you were stealing from them, or did they have an idea at that time?
Yeah, they did. So I actually stole my mom's laptop at one point because I knew where her hidden key was, her hiding key. And I stole her laptop, and that was kind of the last straw. So they were trying to keep in contact with me up until this point, and then at that point they didn't want anything to do with me. So yeah,
it gets to that point where your family literally goes, we're done. We're done.
They can't experience the hurt anymore.
Yeah, it's like, you know what? That's all you just keep stealing from us, and you're still with this same guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he's still there, influence you as well, even though you're doing this too. I mean, it's not like
Mm-hmm.
you're choosing to go along this path, but you felt trapped, one, because of the addiction.
Mm-hmm.
I'm staying close to the drugs, and then I need to still to keep the drug habit going.
Right.
Yeah.
And addiction and abusive relationships or toxic relationships are kind of, they go hand in hand. I feel it's the same feeling. It's the same trapped feeling, like I'm a slave to this person, I'm a slave to this drug.
Right.
And I don't know, it affects your whole mind, body, and soul, where it just takes you over.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I see that a lot in what I, dealing with my clients, where like you said, they go hand in hand. Usually the addiction, they're usually in a toxic relationship, and they literally, it's easier for them to get off the drug than to leave the toxic relationship, which is fascinating, right?
Yeah.
But when your heart's into something, you're emotionally into it. Breaking that emotional attachment, it's like harder than stopping heroin.
It really is.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because when I first met you, when you came in here to Wasatch, you were in rough shape. I mean, we're going to post a picture of you. You posted it actually on Facebook a few days ago, the before and after of what you looked like when you were at the height of your addiction versus how you look now. And it is unbelievable, folks. I mean, you will not believe this picture. I can't wait to post it just so people can see the transformation.
Right.
But that's how you looked when I saw you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, wow, this girl is in rough shape.
Yeah.
And we can kind of chuckle about it, but at the time I thought, how's this girl breathing? How's she even alive? It was a really kind of a, whenever I see a client in that kind of state, it really takes me back a little bit. I'm just like, man, it's amazing what we'll do, how we'll destroy ourselves slowly.
Exactly.
To continue to do the drug or to be in the toxic relationship.
Yeah, well, and I had no hope. I thought that I was just going to be like this forever. I didn't see a way out. I saw people that could get sober, but I thought that could never be me. I was like, there's no way that I can pull myself out of this, because I've tried so many times.
Yeah, right.
But, I've never had success, or had never success.
So talk about your experience. So you eventually decide to come to Wasatch, but before then, what led up to you going, okay, I'm willing to go to treatment, or was it more of, was it court ordered? Were you pushed by family? What happened there?
Yeah, so that's a great story.
Yeah.
So eventually I was into heroin, and then I got into meth as well. And that was kind of when it was everything. I started having psychosis and was doing a lot of crazy things. So my family had an intervention with me because they were afraid I was going to die at this point.
Okay.
And I freaked out, told them that I was leaving. And at this point I had warrants. I had felony warrants out for all of the crimes that I was doing while I was in my addiction. And so my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, he said, well, I'm either going to call the police and you're going to go to jail, or you're going to go to treatment. And I was like, okay, I'll go to treatment.
You're like, okay, I'll take treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so I went to detox, and then I came here to Wasatch.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Yeah. Well, again, obviously your family's trying everything in their power to wake you up, and it took that one comment. Hey, you want jail or rehab? Take your pick, because you're going to get either one right now. And so lucky for you, have people still caring about you in this moment, right?
Completely. It was so, well, and so I need to backpedal just a little bit. So right before that intervention happened, it was September of 2015. My sister, I was withdrawing, and I was trying to get my next fix. I was just busy trying to get my next fix, and my sister texted me. She said, "Where are you? Dad is dying." And my dad was a really healthy guy. He hiked every day. He was extremely active. And so I had no idea. I was like, what is going on? And then she the day before, we knew that he had stomach problems. He was in the ER for stomach problems. And
Okay.
my whole entire life, he'd never been to the ER. So I was like, this must be serious.
Yeah, right.
So
Yeah.
she's texting me, Dad is dying. Where are you? And I eventually got a ride up to Huntsman Cancer Institute, and he had stage 4 lung cancer.
Wow.
And he ended up passing away 2 days later. And so it was awful. It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
And I was in the height of my addiction, and I didn't really have any calm goodbyes before I got to say goodbye to him. So he passed away in September 30th of 2015. And that was a huge awakening as well. So that was part of the intervention.
Yeah, so that happens, and then that kind of, you know, at that time it was, you know, I call it waking up. You know, when someone finally goes, what am I doing? I got to do something different. So that started the process a little bit. You know, like, wow, I got to do something different because I can't believe I didn't, you know, get a chance to maybe have a, you know, the relationship I wanted in that moment with with your father, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer.
Wow.
In 2012. So knowing that my mom was sick, I had just lost my dad. I knew that something had to change, even though I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So the intervention comes in, and then you detox, and then you come to Wasatch. And let's talk a little bit about your experience here. You know, I mean, I was fortunate enough to be your counselor here, and we met quite often, and we did groups together and things like that. And I got to see your, you know, kind of the light turn back on into your life. You know, your countenance started to change. But talk about it from your perspective.
yeah, so I really didn't want to be here at first.
Most people don't.
No. And so I started making some really amazing relationships with the people I was in treatment with. That it was awesome. And so you're right, the light started coming back. I started feeling like myself again. My mom would come and visit me every time, and she would tell me, she said, I feel like you've been lost on an island for 10 plus years, and now you're finally back home.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy to think of it like that. It's because I really was.
Right.
I wasn't myself.
Oh, for sure.
And so here at Wasatch, I really did find out that I could have fun with normal life.
Right.
Being sober wasn't so bad. And having real, honest relationships with other people that understood what I was going through was a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So
what belief systems did you gain here? You know, because I remember when we first met, you know, one of the first things I do with every client is like we start kind of identifying some of these irrational beliefs, these limiting beliefs, you know, and you know, and again, I know it's been a minute since we've met.
Right.
On that capacity is, you know, it really, the number one thing I can remember is just the belief that you weren't good enough. Right. And talk about that transition a little bit.
Yeah, so I started to find my worth again. So I started to I stopped looking at everything that was missing from me, and I started accepting everything that was within me already.
Right.
And just having that transition of looking at the positive rather than the negative was amazing.
Yeah.
Because beauty really does lie within. And my whole life I've been so focused on external things. But when you get to this point of desperation where you have nothing else to live for, you're all you have, and that's amazing.
Right.
So I really learned how to love myself here.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful.
And I also remember working on, you know, the way you would look at yourself when you looked in the mirror and those kind of things. Talk about how, you know, that transition a little bit as well. Like, because again, you would look in the mirror starting at age 17 and go, I hate what I see. Talk about that transition and transformation.
Yeah, so I was suggested to look in the mirror and tell myself that I love myself and that I am worth it, and start telling myself positive affirmations. I felt really kind of weird doing it at first.
Yeah, most people were
crazy,
like, this is weird. Yeah.
But once I started seeing some improvements and I started to feel more peace inside myself and more comfortable with who I was, I continued to do it, and it just started showing, and then my light just kept shining and shining.
Yeah.
So,
well, again, I just remember watching you, just the transformation, just, the short period of time you're here at Wasatch, and I know when you left Wasatch, you really were in a good place. You had looked at yourself differently. The light was on, you were smiling, you were happy, and most importantly, you were also clean. You weren't using.
Right.
So, and then I know you left Wasatch, and let's talk about just from there on. And I know you've had a couple other challenges. So let's just be real and let's talk about that.
Okay. So yeah, after I left Wasatch, I was still dealing with the abusive relationship. I hadn't really ended that all the way yet. And he had a way to manipulate me in a way that I have never really understood.
Yeah.
So shortly after I left Wasatch, I went back to that boyfriend. Because like you said, sometimes we can't leave toxic relationships more than we can leave drugs.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was bizarre. So I went back to him, and eventually the drugs followed.
Yeah.
And things just got really, really bad after that.
Yeah.
My family, they really didn't know what to do at this point, because they got me treatment and I didn't succeed. I didn't follow through.
They saw you coming back, and then you left again. They're like going, wow, what's going on
I
here?
can only imagine the disappointment.
For sure.
So, yeah, that filled me with a lot of shame as well, because I was just feeling really bad about myself. I was like, oh my God, I was given this amazing opportunity, and then I just threw it away again, talking down to myself like, oh, of course I did, because that's all I ever do, And so yeah, my mom's sickness progressed, and this was about 2017. I started getting incarcerated for all of my charges, and I just continued down a really, really dark path.
Yeah.
So then my mom, she told me that she wanted me to live with her, which was crazy. And I told her, I was like, I'm still an active drug user. You want me inside your house?
Do you really want me there?
Yeah. And she said, I would love for you to be my caretaker right now, because I miss you, and I know I don't have very much time left. So please come stay with me. So I went and stayed with my mom while I was still getting high.
Right.
And so she had been on chemo and radiation for 5 years.
Right.
And she finally pulled me aside and told me that she was done fighting, that she couldn't do it anymore. And so I was extremely resentful towards her at first, because my sister and I did not get along at this point at all.
Yeah.
My sister and we bumped heads so much because she just, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And so I was really upset with my mom, and I eventually realized that was the most courageous thing that anyone could decide to do, is just decide that you're done fighting. And so we thought that she had about like 3 to 4 months left after she stopped chemo, and she only had about 1 month. And so January 30th of 2017, she passed away. Wow. And my mom was my rock.
Right.
She was my best friend for most of my life. So when that happened, it kind of sent me into like a really, really deep spiral.
Right.
And my sister wouldn't let me live with her, and the only place that I stayed was with my abusive boyfriend.
Wow.
And I forget to mention, at this point, the emotional abuse had turned to physical. So it turned me into a physical person too. So I had never been physical my whole entire life. Yeah. And then I became this monster. And we would just beat each other up for no reason. And it was just so out of my character.
Wow. Man, when people, I know you really well. And I know that's not you. I mean, I just know that. And if people were sitting here right now, they were like, you're that girl? You were doing that stuff? They would be surprised. But again, that's how vicious and miserable things can get when you're doing drugs,
Mm-hmm.
because it turns you into someone you're not. Like you said, you did things you said you never in your life would ever dream of, because again, it's not you. That to your core, that's not who you are.
Right.
But thinking about, and if you think back all the stuff you went through in your life, you know, and then you now you've lost both parents
Mm-hmm.
to, you know, and you know, and then you and your sister, you've even kind of lost her in the sense that you guys have just butted heads so much for obvious reasons, like you said. Now you're just like, now all I have is this abusive monster in my life
Mm-hmm.
that I still can, for some reason, won't walk away from.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, it was maddening. I felt crazy almost. I was
Yeah.
like, what is wrong with me? Like, I know I'm worth much more in my core. I knew that,
Mm-hmm.
but just I couldn't bring myself to change.
Yeah.
So, eventually I got put in jail again, this time for my felonies. And so it was a pretty long stay. And I got offered drug court.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then I got offered another treatment center, or go to another treatment center.
Right.
And so having prison under my belt now,
Mm-hmm.
if I don't complete drug court, that was a huge, like, okay, I need to change my life.
Yeah.
I don't
Right.
belong in prison.
I don't want to go to prison.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so I got out of jail. I went to this other treatment center and I completed drug court within, with no infractions, which is amazing for me.
Yeah, especially up to that point, what you've been doing with your life.
Right.
So for you to go and do that perfectly.
Yeah, it was insane. And I was like, oh my, is this really me right now?
I'm doing this.
Yeah. So I had been drug tested since I was 17 consistently.
Right.
And so I never completed a probation really, besides when I was 17 and I got around it. So it was insane. And I was on APMP, adult parole and probation, as well as drug court. So I was double
Both
supervised.
those. Yeah,
And
for sure.
I completed both of them successfully, which
Wow.
was a miracle in itself.
Yeah.
So,
And so when you completed those, what year is it now?
2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and this is when the turnaround obviously it started when you, like you said, it really, the wake-up call started a lot back when your father passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And just these little challenges and trials along the way, interventions, you know, you come to Wasatch, that brought on some light, you know, all these little things are starting to slowly wake you up. Now you've gone through all of this. Now at this point, are you feeling like, okay, I've got this?
Yeah. So, my mom was a huge, huge encouragement for me to fight for my life. I used to tell myself, like, okay, you're going to fight for your life the way that mom fought for hers, because, you know, she fought for her life for so long.
She
know,
really did.
And
yeah.
she had no choice, and it was cancer, so
Right.
she couldn't do anything about it. And
Right.
I had the ability, I had the tools, I found a solution.
Right.
And so it really was a huge encouragement for me.
Yeah.
And then I also found the 12 steps, the 12-step program.
Right.
And
Which
that
helped a ton.
it helped me so much.
Real quick, when you get out of drug court and APMP, did you, at this point, had finally got away from that relationship?
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk.
To
Yeah, we
mention.
might want to mention that.
Yeah, that's a huge part.
Yes. We don't leave that out.
Yeah, no. So when I was in that last treatment center, I was put on restriction from talking to him at any costs.
Right.
So, yeah, which helped a lot.
Yeah,
and at
sure.
this other treatment center, I was finally willing to allow myself to be close to people.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned that they say the opposite of addiction is human connection.
Sure.
And so that's
Absolutely.
literally what I found. And so I started making all these new relationships, these new friends with people that actually loved me for who I was at the core,
Yeah.
who wanted what was best for me.
Yeah.
And I was able to get to the point where I knew that I was worth more than that. So I ended up blocking his number, telling him that I found a better life. I wish him the best, and that's that. And yeah, it's been crazy. I look back at my journals from that relationship, and I wrote, I wish I could just leave. Why can't I leave? I'm miserable. I hate him. I hate myself.
Yeah.
I wish I could just leave. And to see myself today free from him is a miracle.
It is a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. And again, like I said, the picture says it all. I'm not kidding you. It is unbelievable when you guys see this. But is there anything else you'd like to share up to this point? I mean, you've been doing well.
Mm-hmm.
You look amazing. You not only do you look amazing, but I can feel your light, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like I can feel that you're doing good, if that makes sense. Like I can see it in your face and your countenance. It's pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I never thought I'd be here, honestly.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I always thought you could do it.
Mm-hmm.
There was never a time that I thought, well, she can't do this. I always knew you could.
Right.
But it doesn't matter what I thought. It was what you really believed to your core.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so to see you now embracing that yourself and doing it is really cool.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, you betcha. Oh, wow. What an amazing journey.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, seriously, like I don't even know if this is doing it justice by how we even talk, like how hard it was, and to see you now and how good you're doing. And, you know, you seem very happy. You look, like I said, you look really good. Let's talk about, I mean, how do you feel today? Let's just talk about that. Like, how are you feeling right now?
So before my life, I'd always have this tightness in my chest. I always feel like I felt unsafe all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And now I feel a sense of serenity and
Okay.
security. And today I know whatever happens in my life, I'll be okay.
Love that. I love that.
Before it wasn't like that.
Right.
So I've also heard this from another person in recovery. They told me to turn my fear into faith, which is huge.
Yeah.
Because we have so much fear, and I'm afraid of growing sometimes, which is so bizarre.
Yeah.
But staying in my comfort zone has really gotten me nowhere.
Right.
So today I do things to get me out of my comfort zone on the daily basis that are going to better my life.
For sure.
And it's helped me grow so much. It's been insane.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is amazing. If you could give any advice to someone that's listening to this right now who may be in a toxic relationship, or they're dealing with addiction, or they're just looking in the mirror and saying, I hate what I see. What advice would you give someone right now who's struggling in that area, in those areas?
First thing I would say is to reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out, because there is always somebody that can understand what you're going through.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
And I know it's scary. I know it makes you vulnerable, and you can kind of feel weak at times when you reach out and ask for help.
Yeah.
But in all reality, what do you have to lose?
Sure.
So
Okay.
reaching out and just not giving up.
Yeah.
Just, there's hard days. We all have hard days.
Yeah.
But if you don't give up, it just is amazing.
Yeah. Great advice. I'm going to ask you to read something. It's up on my wall here. Would you read that out loud?
Yeah. The most delightful surprise in life is to suddenly recognize there is nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I saw in you when I saw you 3 years ago, even when you look like death.
Literally.
But I knew you had this belief, though, that was irrational, that you weren't good enough, that somehow you were different, so you couldn't connect, and that my problems were so big that it's impossible that I'll ever change. And I realized, I saw that those are irrational. I see it in all my clients, but when I remember seeing you, these are the things I try to teach my clients. And I loved what you said. You know, you said, even though I go through a hard time or a bad day, I know I'll always be okay. I mean, it really is, the foundation we should build our lives on is, at the end of the day, we're still going to be okay.
Right.
I mean, look at you. Here you are sitting here. You look amazing. You're doing great. in spite of all those things we've just talked about that you've been through.
Right.
Blows me away.
Yeah. And what I've been taught is to turn your pain into purpose, which is beautiful.
Ooh, yeah,
I
like
never
that.
thought that my jail mugshot where I was close to death could help somebody. You know, I never in my wildest dreams imagined that.
Yeah.
And that's amazing that I can do that today.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. Well, I just want to thank you for being willing to share your story with me today. I think the world of you, and I'm so happy to see you happy
Mm-hmm.
and that you're doing good things. And so I can't thank you enough. I want you to know how much I appreciate your willingness to share.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there you go, listeners. What an amazing story. Hayley Evans. If someone wanted to maybe reach out to you
Mm-hmm.
and just send you a message or to ask you a question, is there a way that they could do that if you feel comfortable sharing like an email, or if maybe it's just, on Messenger or something?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah. I have Facebook, I have Instagram.
Okay.
And I can give my email as well.
Yeah, if you're okay, go ahead.
Yeah. It's Hayley, Hayley .Evans, EVANS 17 @hotmail.com.
Right. So if you have any questions, or if you want to just tell her thanks for sharing her story, please reach out to her. And again, thanks for the support, listeners. And again, thanks to Veracity Networks for their sponsorship. And I'm just so grateful that I get to sit and hear such amazing stories all the time. And yours is no different. It's amazing. So you're great.
Thank you.
I'm glad I know you.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.